everyone, welcome back to another week of the Triple Play. This is Danielle. This week we have a lot to talk about, especially with the SEC. Things are just looking crazy right now in this conference. Just like every week, we are rotating people in and out that want to be on the show. So this week we have two freshmen, and David, I will let you introduce yourself first.
Okay, I'm David Wilson. I'm from the Nashville area. I'm a sports journalism major with a focus in broadcasting.
Okay, Rico Mckinney. I'm from Memphis. First, I'm so excited to be on the show. I'm also a sports journalism major. My focus really, I want to ultimately get on ESPN, but I also want to potentially cover the Cowboys and also the Grizzlies, and most likely be a sideline reporter as well. So yes, as I mentioned, I'm a freshman as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. Like I said, a lot's been going on in the SEC, but first off, we're going to start by talking about the UT-UTC game this week for homecoming. Great win for the Vols, 45-10. This is the strongest I think we've looked all season, to be quite honest. Justin Worley, absolutely phenomenal. This is the game that we have been waiting to see from this quarterback. His stat line was superb. 19 for 24, 198 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 5 sacks. That's still pretty high, but it's not as bad as the 6 sacks we've seen previously. Still really good for him. I loved what I saw with him.
I'm not also sold on Justin Worley. I wasn't extremely impressed. He had a good game, albeit against what's what you play?
UTC.
Right, UTC, Chattanooga. So I think coming out this game, what caught my attention, of course, our defense is on another level. Going into the season, we got 3 games that's coming up that's going to be the hardest of the season. I think one thing that stood out to me is going forward. Of course, Bush Jones say brick by brick, and we started, 22 freshmen played yesterday. Saturday. So that stood out to me, and they hold it on. We had a phenomenal performance going up, and it's just a momentum builder going into, of course, next week, Ole Miss. And so I found that Saturday was a good momentum builder for Tennessee.
Yeah, and we needed it because after the heartbreak loss against Florida, 10-9, you need to come off feeling better about yourself, so why not play your little brother in UTC for an FCS school? And the offensive line is young, so the 5 sacks, and they had I believe a 2-time All-American on the end. So, he was going to be the tough matchup defensively anyway. Worley's stats were pretty good. Going into Ole Miss, you kind of need this win, so big SEC matchup coming up.
All right.
Definitely. And I think one thing I was really happy to see with Worley were the 2 rushing touchdowns in the second quarter and the third quarter. We've been waiting on him to just keep the ball and just go with it.
Yeah.
I know that's one thing I've complained about week in and week out, but the fact that he did that, granted they were short runs. The one in the second quarter I believe was for 8 yards, and the third quarter it was 1 yard, but that 1 yard run in for the TD was pretty good. It was a nice little stance that he had there trying to make sure he could get in, but yeah, it was still really impressive to see that from him. The offensive line still struggling. The 5 sacks were not what we were looking for, but UTC, they still came in. They played really strong. I would say total offense, they had 201 yards, which isn't too bad considering we had 340. I was really impressed by UTC. I'd never really watched them before or really paid attention to anything, but I was highly impressed by them.
All right. And also we was impressed by Justin Worley with the 2 touchdowns. I never seen it. It's another side. So looking at Justin Worley, wow, that's a new edge that we could find in him that we could definitely use coming up to the next upcoming week. So Justin Worley truly surprised me. Mm-hmm. His passing yards wasn't all that impressive, but the 3 touchdowns, of course, and 2 on the ground, that was, it's just it brings a new level of excitement to our Tennessee fan base, and so I think we got something to look forward to going into the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, definitely, and it's supposed to be nowadays it's all about the dual threat quarterback, so he showed that a little bit there. Rushing touchdowns, anything that'll help. We couldn't really get the running game going the whole game, so it was nice to get those rushing touchdowns from your quarterback.
Definitely, and also we should also note that Nathan Peterman also had a rushing touchdown for 14 yards in the fourth quarter, I was really excited to see that too. I know a lot of people are pretty negative whenever it comes to Peterman as a quarterback, but I think whenever he came in, he really took control. I liked what I saw from him as well. Overall, really good performance for the Vols. Hopefully this will build some momentum for this weekend because it's not going to be an easy task against the Rebels. We'll be heading to Ole Miss. this Saturday to play against the Rebels, who are 6-0 right now, number 3 in the nation, which is something I never thought I'd be saying right now. But yes, they are number 3 in the nation. They beat Texas A&M this week, 35-20, which was a really good game. I was expecting it to be extremely close, like maybe by like 3 points. But, I mean, both teams came out really hard and played, but Ole Miss, there's just something about them this year.
The whole state of Mississippi really has caught everybody off guard. I mean, with Mississippi State bringing the number one first time in the school's history, it's been the number one AP poll. Ole Miss just coming off Alabama and A&M, both dominant victories. I mean, everyone thought, I was like, oh man, the A&M might be close, and then next thing you know, they pulled away. I mean, the scoop and score off Kenny Hill's fumble, and I was like, man, they're really pulling away from this one, and they're really surprising the whole country. So.
Definitely, and Bo Wallace has been just lights out. 124 completions right now with 181 attempts. He has 1,700 yards and 15 touchdowns. That, I shouldn't be as surprised as I am about it, but the fact that he could have came here, granted that, I mean, things didn't work out because Kiffin was recruiting him. Kiffin didn't want him. So it's still a little tough to face, but Bo Wallace is one quarterback that I love to watch now.
Right, and this is Ole Miss first time started 6-0 since 1962. That's extremely impressive. One thing when I look at Ole Miss that comes to my mind is poise. Their whole team, their focus. I know Bo Wallace, he came into the game, he said, one thing we need to do is just we all need to get better. I'm paraphrasing, but that just showed that team is focused and they have a drive to get to ultimate goal, and I think that's going to stick with them through the rest of the season, ultimately trying to get to the playoffs and also trying to get that championship. So Bo Wallace, he had 2 rushing touchdowns as well, 1 passing touchdown. He looked great. And also from the Auburn side of Kenny Hill, I mean, I think he's still a front runner for me, but of course the turnovers have to get him. Ole Miss defense is impressive as well as also. So I think they're a solid team with a good focus on their head. So
Definitely. And on the Mississippi State side, you got to look at the new Heisman frontrunner, really, Dak Prescott. I mean, he's 3 top 10 wins over top 10 schools, sorry. And that's first time since, I believe, Miami in 2001. So that's, I mean, you can't really just come off and do that, especially in being unranked in the preseason AP poll. So it really caught everybody off guard going into LSU, beating them, and Alabama, of course.
that was
Definitely.
That was a sweet pick six by Cody Pruitt. I mean, pick six, Kenny Hill, I think the second quarter. That was very surprising. I think that was a nice element on the defense as well. So
Definitely. So this weekend's definitely going to be a really tough match for the Vols. Hopefully it won't be as ugly as people are predicting. I think if Worley has another performance like he did this weekend, especially from the rushing standpoint, it could look a little better for us. Our defense is going to have a lot to handle with Ole Miss. If you look at their stats on the season alone, for rushing, they have a total of 875 yards, and receiving has a total of 1,771 yards. This is going to be a handful of a game for this defense, but I think they'll come out strong like they have been. It'll just be a really interesting game. But looking around at the SEC, everything is just upside down. Powerhouses are not powerhouses. There's been a shift of power from Alabama right over to the border to Mississippi, because we've been so used the past few years to Alabama and Auburn being at the top of everything. But now it's Mississippi State and Ole Miss, which is just mind-boggling. I never really thought I'd be saying this for football, but it's just been an overall crazy week. Right now, the only 2 undefeated teams in the SEC, of course, are Ole Miss and Mississippi State, who I'm sure one of them will lose a game before they meet at the very end of the season, but if not, maybe that'll be a really big talking point going into playoffs at the end of the season. At the SEC East, everything's still up in the air right now. Georgia, Kentucky are the 2 top runners right now. Kentucky being the second one, I should say, in the standings. That's mind-boggling. As I've mentioned before, my dad's a Kentucky fan. We haven't really talked much about Kentucky football because it's weird. It's really weird. The Vols are still 0-2 in the conference, 3-3 overall. But yeah, definitely, it's all just been really crazy so far. But looking at the games from this week in the SEC, things have just been really confusing, I would say. Kentucky, of course, they were favorited to beat Louisiana Monroe they came out and beat them 48-14. Missouri could not do anything against Georgia, even without Todd Gurley, who, of course, last week.
They didn't miss a step.
No, not at all. Last week, Todd Gurley, of course, we found out that there was some news with him being suspended indefinitely. But Georgia didn't look like they were hurting without him.
No, what is the new freshman running back? He's taken his place. Chubb, I believe.
Chubb, yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he really came off, and they knew that. I believe Gurley made up 36% of Georgia's offense,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, everybody knew that they had a new job to do,
Mm-hmm.
step up, and try to get their running game going. I mean, the passing game's already kind of
Mm-hmm.
there, but they knew with Gurley out that everybody had to step up and do their part to win a game.
Who's offense coordinator in Georgia? You guys know? Well,
I'm actually not sure of that one.
yeah, I think I looked at the schedule. I looked at the standings the other day. I was like, wow, Georgia. I thought maybe it's gonna be a close game because they missing a key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's a Heisman front runner, and judging, Gurley. Of course, most people saying he was gonna be the one that win the Heisman. And of course, that was an unexpected loss for them. I thought maybe that's gonna be a detriment to them to the offensive side of the ball, but they didn't miss a beat.
Mm-hmm.
They came out. Full-fledged murdering that team, and so that freshman running back they have now, he's lethal and he's formidable as well. So I think now they have some confidence going into this season, because I really doubt if Gurley plays another snap for Georgia this season. I think he's going to go into the draft and go get his money like he deserves. So I think they're gonna miss him, of course, but I think they have some confidence going forward.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Especially whenever you go on the road to Missouri and shut them out 34-0. And then they still have, that's a pretty tough schedule. You look at Arkansas, they've been running with most teams. They just couldn't get the job done. 14-13 loss against Alabama. And then even the week before that against A&M, they lost in overtime. But, Florida, that's a pretty tough test. And then Kentucky's obviously the front runner in the SEC East. And then they have Auburn. So Georgia's schedule from here on out looks pretty tough. They don't really have anything promising for a win. That 34-0 against Missouri on the road signifies that they could probably be back in the front running for the SEC East.
Definitely. I think one thing that's also really interesting about the Missouri-Georgia matchup, we expected Matty Mock to come out and just be a really solid quarterback for this game. He threw 4 interceptions, 9 for 21 on his passes, and only getting 97 yards. I don't think anybody was expecting that kind of performance from Matty Mock. He's looked at as one of the premier quarterbacks, I would say, in the league itself. So him throwing 4 interceptions, first off, that's really bad for him. Not something I was going to expect. I don't want to say it was bad, but it was. It's not what you want to see from him. But also, that just puts another emphasis on the Georgia defense. They really came out strong. I wasn't expecting them to be as strong as they were, but overall, very interesting game. Looking at other games from the league, Alabama beat Arkansas 14-13. I was not expecting this to be that close of a game.
Mm-hmm.
I was really thinking Alabama would come out, just take control. Granted, they are 5-1 on the season, 2-1 in the SEC, but they were playing against a team who was winless in the SEC. But for Arkansas to keep it that close, I think that was very impressive.
Yeah, they've been, they ran, their first game of the season against Auburn, that was kind of, unfortunate really to go up against the number 6 seed at the time. But then, A&M the week before that, 3 weeks, so they came off a bye week. But A&M, they ran with them most of the game. They just lost it in overtime, 35-28. And, that was against the Heisman hopeful Kenny Hill. And then Alabama, they were kind of they still don't really know who their quarterback is. Blake Sims has been pretty well for them, but at the same time, they're still kind of struggling in that area. And then to be, like you said, 14-13, that was a pretty close game, but they've been running with the high teams like that.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I think Alabama was a shell of itself. They came out of last week against Mississippi State and just lost that game. And so I think they was not expecting that. And so they was still in their heads coming into this week. But I will never count Nick Saban out. I think they're going to bounce back and they're going to come into the next week. I think they're going to look better than ever. I think they're going to be, of course, one of the top contentions. I know they're not going to get the standings back, but I think basically they just was a shut of themselves. To come in this season and lose that game unexpectedly, that's something that nobody not going to take easy. So Alabama, I think it was definitely a disappointing loss, but I think it's something that is not indicative of what we should expect coming forward.
Speaking of close games, Vanderbilt beat Charleston Southern only by 1 point, 21-20. This, I mean, okay, Charleston Southern, granted, they are 5-1 overall, but you have to consider the conference that they're in. This is a team that you don't hear about, playing against a team that is not doing favorable this season, to put it nicely. But just looking at their stats, Vanderbilt had only 11 first downs, a total yards number of 295 yards in comparison to Charleston Southern's 389. Those numbers for Charleston Southern are incredible. I was not expecting those high of numbers. But also, Vanderbilt only had 1 turnover, which isn't horrible. Johnny McCrary threw 1 interception and 1 touchdown while going 10 for 16 with 169 yards. Not too bad, but I think most people could have been expecting a little bit more from Vanderbilt, but they just are not having a good season.
Really, and it's been like that the whole season. Whenever your head coach leaves and takes the players with you, go to Penn State. I mean, that's pretty tough on them. But do you think they would get a good hire with Stanford's offensive coordinator, Derek Mason?
Definitely.
But I mean, they really have some QB struggles. I mean, they had their top receiver, really the top receiver in the SEC, go to the NFL draft. He plays for Philadelphia Eagles now. I mean, it's kind of been, like you said, an off-balance season. Maybe they'll bounce back, try to get a bowl game. I mean, it'd be kind of hard to do it now, but I mean, Vanderbilt's typically had the tough schedule of the SEC, being as low of a school as they are.
Definitely.
Charleston Southern is a 5-1 team. That's surprising me. I never heard of them, but someone kind of disqualified myself. But I don't think Vanderbilt should hold their boats right. I know they shouldn't get too excited about this win because, of course, they got Missouri next week, and I don't think they're going to get blown out in that game as well. But I guess it's some hopeful going into Nashville right now. Vanderbilt, they've pulled off a win that I guess should have been expected, but, of course, looking at their schedule, they shouldn't do too much of anything going forward.
Definitely. Moving away from the SEC, looking at just all of college football in general right now, the standings have gone through yet another shakeup. And it's one that I think most people might have seen coming, but it's still shocking nonetheless. Florida State, who was number 1 for the whole season last season, is now number 2. They have been taken over by Mississippi State. The top 5 that is now listed for this week: Mississippi State, Florida State, Mississippi, Baylor, and Notre Dame. They are all undefeated. Another undefeated team to look at is number 25 in Marshall, who I'm really surprised is still undefeated. It's been a while since they've had this good of a season to where they could be ranked. I'm really impressed with it. They were not ranked the week before. Mississippi State and Mississippi, they were tied for 3rd, and now one is a distinct 3rd place and the other one is distinct 1st. I think this is just really surprising, but to take note with the new AP poll, the SEC has 4 of the top 7 spots and 5 of the top 10. Those being Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Auburn at number 6, Alabama at number 7, and Georgia at number 10. This is kind of weird, I think, because we're not used to seeing some of these teams in the top 25, especially from the SEC. It's just been a really crazy season thus far for the NCAA.
Oh, really? And I mean, the Baylor TCU game this past week, that was a huge shootout down in Texas. I mean, 61-58, Baylor coming out on top. It's pretty great. Field goal in the last minute to win it. Another top 5 matchup, really, of Florida State and Notre Dame this week. That's going to be the quote-unquote game of the century. You got rid of the past Heisman winner, Jameis Winston. And he's coming off a pretty decent game.
Definitely. Yeah, like you were just mentioning, Florida State did have a dominant win against Syracuse, 38-20. Looking at other games in the NCAA, like you said, TCU and Baylor, great game to watch. North Carolina and Notre Dame, I also thought that was a very interesting game. I did not expect the Tar Heels to come out as strong as they did. It was great to see. Notre Dame, I feel like there's something special there with that team.
I don't know. I'm not sold on that. I'm not sure. Of course, you have 48 points they put on Notre Dame. That's the defense.
They put up 50.
Right.
50 to 43.
Right. Oh, 43.
Right. Yeah.
I apologize. Yeah. So Notre Dame defense is something that we have to cause a pause about. I mean, so I'm not sold on their defense. I'm not sold on the team as a whole. But I think they would make some noise in this conference. I think going forward, they also would make some noise. But yeah, Notre Dame is something. I just don't know. It's something missing. You said something special. I think it's something special, but it's something missing as well. So I'm not sure what to think about when it comes to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Good point.
Their schedule has been kind of flimsy. I mean, they did have Stanford, who was a top 25 team. I think they were 17th coming into that game. They got Florida State this week, who's number 2. They still have Arizona State, who's a 25 team ranked on their schedule.
Right.
Louisville, I mean, they're unranked, but they're still a team to be.
They're always there.
Yeah. And then of course USC, always being that game to watch. So.
Right, and speaking of USC, they upset Arizona this week. Arizona was number 10. USC beat them 28 to 26. That was a really impressive game. Oregon just was really strong against UCLA. They beat the Bruins 42 to 30. Oklahoma beat Texas 31 to 26. Kansas came so close to beating Oklahoma State, and I think that's a really big shock. 27 to 20. I was not expecting just a mere touchdown between them, so that was really cool to see. And then another upset that was really surprising, Duke over Georgia Tech. Granted, Georgia Tech is pretty low ranked. They're 22nd, but Duke came up and beat them 31 to 25. Really impressive there for the Blue Devils. They've been making news a lot lately as a surprise team, and I think that's really good for them. I mean, granted, since they're always known for basketball, but it's nice to see them doing something with football. So that's all of everything that's happening with the NCAA right now. Next week should prove to be just as interesting. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the NFL real quick. The Titans actually won. They beat Jacksonville. Really good for the Titans. It was really close. But, I mean, Jacksonville, they've been struggling a lot this season.
Yeah, 0-6. First time a team has gone back-to-back 0-6 since the 93-94 Bengals. I mean, you got to look at their situation. It's been kind of bad for a few years, really. I mean, Blake Bortles still did pretty well, over 300 yards passing. I mean, that pick, I believe, and that was it. But, you know, Tennessee has had their ups and downs this season. You thought, I mean, it was pretty well starting out to win over Kansas City, and we were like, oh man, you know, this might be a promising season. But then dropping 4 in a row, that's not really promising after that. So some heartbreak losses too, and giving up the largest road comeback in history to the Browns of all teams. So.
Right.
These two teams is just inept at best to me. I'm not understanding Tennessee at all. The Titans is just. Blake Bortles really proved himself to me. Of course, it was arguments coming out the draft whether he'll be formidable. I think he showed his own. This not only this game, but the last couple of weeks. But I don't think it's so much on Blake Bortles. It's just the whole team. It's just a curse on the team. I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe they should draft a Tebow. My God, I love me some Tebow. But
they passed on Manziel. So
right, that's another story for a different day. But the Titans, it wasn't a pretty win. Of course, they had a last-second field goal block that won the game. I think that was really something to smile about. Sammy Hill, that he made the play of the game. I think they owed it to him. All should take him out to dinner because he won that game for the Titans. But that was I guess it was impressive given to what the Titans been through. Last week, just something that I don't understand what happened. I thought they won that game. I thought maybe Manziel would get in because they lost, but they just crushed my dreams. But the Titans, I guess I'll give them kudos this week. We'll see what they do next week, but I'm just not sold as of yet.
Definitely. Moving on to Evolve for Life that we love to talk about. Peyton Manning threw 3 touchdowns yesterday, which puts him at, I believe, 2 below Brett Favre for yet another record. We should just call him Mr. Record Breaker because that's what he is right now. But really great game for Peyton Manning, as always. 22 for 33 with his passing, 237 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, but 2 sacks. Not too bad. I mean, yet again, 3 touchdowns, dominating right now.
Yeah. And, I mean, he's on my fantasy team, so he needs to keep it up, give me those wins. But what's really shocking to me on the Denver side is the receiving core. Like, they're really good. I mean, Demaryius Thomas is good, Julius Thomas is good, and Emmanuel Sanders, the new addition from Pittsburgh, is really good. But Wes Welker, where has he been? I mean, I know that he got suspended the first 4 games, but when he came back, I was expecting, I was like, he's got his number 1 slot back, but I guess Emmanuel Sanders took that role, which is fine because he's doing great. But Wes Welker, I mean, what did he get? 80, not even 80 yards, like 8 yards yesterday. I mean, it was really shocking this whole season what Wes Welker has not done.
You know what it was? You know what it is?
What was that?
Is that he stopped taking the stuff. He got caught. I'm just kidding. Maybe should say that. But Peyton Manning, he just Mr. Reliable.
Yes.
And one thing I look at Peyton Manning is not what he does on the field, but it's really what he do behind the scene. His preparation is second to none. And I think that's something we look at Peyton Manning is his preparation and the work he put off the field, looking at film, in the weight room. He's just an ultimate person that you could model your organization off of. I just extremely impressed when it comes to Peyton Manning. He's just somebody you would love to build your organization around. So I'm just happy for Peyton Manning, and of course glad he's involved, right?
Yes, I mean, he's probably the best head in the NFL right now to have in the game. He's very schooled in the game. I mean, obviously, you always have the QB argument, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. Well, Tom Brady's got 5 rings. But, I mean, yes, it's really about what you do in the postseason, but if you look at the regular season stats, Peyton Manning dominates. I mean, obviously, only 2 touchdowns away from passing Brett Favre, or tying Brett Favre, rather. I mean, he's just really schooled in the game. He's been in it for a long time. I mean, obviously that season off with the neck injury, that was pretty bad. Hurt his stats, really, if you look at that. But still, though, really schooled in the game, racking it up on all statistics. I'm surprised he's only 11th in the league right now in terms of QB. So
Right. Moving on to another game, one that's tough for me to talk about because we've talked about the Browns so far. The Browns beat the Steelers 31-10. So yeah, this makes Ben Roethlisberger 18-2 against the Browns overall. Granted, he's been in the league for 10 seasons, so it's not too horrible. It's one of the better records that a quarterback has against a rival. He threw 228 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Le'Veon Bell was pretty good, not what we've usually seen from him, 18 carries for 82 yards. Overall, it was just a sloppy game on offense. Defense looked very winded against Cleveland, which just it boggles my mind. But I'll give credit to Cleveland. Hoyer, he was 8 for 17, 217 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, which was impressive, I must say. But yeah, it was just a sloppy game for the Steelers. But granted, Cleveland is looking strong, which is weird to say. They are not in the bottom of the AFC North. The Steelers are, which is another weird thing to say. But overall, good game for Cleveland. I'll give them that. That's really tough for me to say. I have to choke out those words. But, yeah, I guess you could go ahead and say Cleveland is a contender this year, which also they're a contender for the AFC North, which is just kind of weird. Yeah. The AFC North in general is just flopped everywhere. So it's the 3rd time that the Browns beat the Steelers in 23 games, which just breaks my heart. But like I said, good game for the Browns. They needed it.
Really, the Browns are confident. I mean, they came off the biggest road comeback in history against the Titans. I mean, yeah, it's the Titans of all teams, but I mean that's still that's something to brag about, right? And then to come in on the AFC North division game and beat the Steelers, I mean that's something you need. Big Ben beating them 18 times, I believe, in his career, which is the most a QB has ever beaten one team except for Brett Favre with the Detroit Lions. So, I mean, that's you. I mean, as a Steelers fan, you'd be like, oh, we got this, Big Ben. But, obviously.
It's never the same.
Right. I mean, he's lost one game against them, so history tends to repeat itself in some ways. So.
Right. Talking about another Vol, we're going to transition into another game, but to talk about another Vol, Jason Witten put up some big numbers yesterday. He got 900 career interceptions now, which is great to see from a Vol, but, yeah. I should say Dallas is looking very surprising this year. Yeah. I'll let you take over.
I am so happy. I'm a Cowboys fan, for those you don't know. I am extremely happy. Jason Witten, I almost forgot he's a Vol. He just passed 10,000 passing yards, receiving yards for a tight end. He's actually, I think, number 2 or 3 behind in Gonzalez. So Jason Witten is Mr. Reliable also. That's kind of crazy. All the Tennessee get the Mr. Reliable tag. So Jason Witten is shown time out of time that he could be there in clutch situations. But transition to the Cowboys as a whole, me being a Cowboys fan, I know Cowboys fans out there these last couple of years, it just been something, a travesty. But going into this game, I was extremely impressed on and off the field. The poise, the discipline. One word they associated with the Cowboys was the lack of discipline. Jason Garrett, he's showing that he could be a reliable coach. He's showing that he's worth the extension. Jerry Jones has been doing an excellent job as GM with picking players and putting players in position to succeed. The offensive line, of course, I think we need to get game balls split down the middle. With the defense was one of the worst defense in NFL history last year. To come in this lead and look, I mean, they was matching up great with against Seattle. And to come into the 12th man in Seattle, I was just extremely impressed how we came off. We showed resilience. We even though we had some missed failures, they still bounced back. And so Tony Romo, time out of time, he's shown up. And he didn't. I was waiting for the big moment, even as a fan, but he pressed through.
Right.
And I was extremely impressed. So I'm excited about this season. I'm not all in yet. I want him to show me that they can withstand through the season. We got 3 great games that's coming up against the Redskins and it's against the Giants. Then at home against the Cardinals. So Dallas, way to go, Dallas! How about those Cowboys?
Yeah, I mean, they've really been quieting the haters, so to speak. I mean,
Definitely.
they came out of the gates losing. I mean, they got blown out by San Francisco, no lie. But then now winning 5 in a row. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, the receivers, Terrence Williams on one side, Des Bryant on the other. What's to argue about that? I mean, Terrence Williams is having a pretty decent year. He really saved the game for him yesterday with that catch, the tiptoe catch.
Yeah.
That was the catch of the game. Chris Carter on ESPN calling it the catch of the
year.
Catch of the year,
right,
yeah,
right.
already.
The play of the year.
Yeah.
Looking around at the league in general, Colts beat the Texans 33-28. Andrew Luck is still just being Andrew Luck. He threw 3 touchdowns yesterday, so no big surprise there. Ravens beat the Buccaneers 48-17. Lions beat the Vikings 17-3, putting the Lions at 4-2 on the season. Patriots beat the Bills 37-22. I don't think that's much of a surprise, but Tom Brady threw 4 touchdowns, which is just mind-boggling, but that's Tom Brady. The Bengals-Panthers game was really interesting. It ended in a tie in overtime. Just a very odd game. It's weird to see a tie in football again. It's been a while. Packers beat the Dolphins 27-4. Close game that I don't think many people were expecting. Packers are 4-2 on the season now. Chargers beat the Raiders 31-28. I'm sorry. Bears beat the Falcons 27-13. And the Eagles beat the Giants, just completely blew them out, 27-0. That's big for the Eagles. They're 5-1 on the season now. And then tonight we'll see a matchup between the 49ers and the Rams. That should be a really interesting game. 49ers are 3-2 on the season. Rams are 1-3. They're 0-2 at home, it looks like. So this should be really interesting. I would think with it being a Monday night game, they might get some momentum, but anything's possible right now. We'll go ahead and look at the MLB real quick. Playoffs are still going on. In the American League, you're seeing the matchup between Kansas City and Baltimore. Right now, KC is leading 2-0. I don't know what happened with the Royals. It's just they went into the right into the wild card, and they were insane. It was a great game whenever they played against Oakland in 12 innings, winning 9-8. But I mean, I think the Royals are just a big surprise this year. We could possibly see them in the World Series with the way that they're playing. I would not be surprised, to be quite honest. But looking over at the National League, it's tied up right now between the Cardinals and the Giants. Cardinals won last night, 5-4. Very close game. I mean, you expect the Cardinals to do well in October. That's like whenever they thrive the most. So that should be really interesting. But I think as of now, previous weeks we've been talking about who we'd pick for the World Series. My picks are all gone, right? I mean,
Wow.
I had the Angels, I had the Pirates, and now it's all just blown up. But I think looking at the 4 teams we have left right now, I think the strongest teams that would make it would be the Royals and the Cardinals. I know those are the easy picks you could say, but you can't really say no to St. Louis.
Well, I mean, coming in on the ALCS, they really thought it was a David and Goliath matchup. The Orioles having the most home runs coming into the MLB, and the Royals having the least. So they were like,
Right.
oh, how's that going to work for Kansas City? But they've really shown that the small ball can win games. I mean,
Absolutely.
bunts across, steals. They've had the most steals in the MLB. I mean, they've really been doing it. That's how they've been coming back in these games. That's how they beat Oakland, really, is stealing
Right.
and then bunting across. The next thing you know, they get the walk-off single.
I think the Royals, it's just a spectacular story. And
Yeah.
one stat that comes to my mind is no team has ever lost a best of 7 series when they come in winning the first 2 road games.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Royals to be out of the postseason, what is it, 30 years? That's
Something like that.
spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
It's something like 29 or 30,
29,
something like that. And it goes back to the Giants when they was like 9-7 and went straight to the Super Bowl. It goes back to Ray Lewis when they got the momentum that you have when it's something that you plan for. I'm on the Royals bandwagon right now. I'm gonna jump on it, and I think they're gonna go all the way.
Really, I would like to see a wild card team get into the World Series, and to win it would be something else.
Absolutely. As a Pirates fan, that's what I hoped for last year. It looked promising, and then this year you play against the Giants and you get shut out, and you have 3 hits in comparison to their 11, which is a stat that's never going to leave my mind. It still shows up in my nightmares nightly, but we'll move away from the MLB. It's still just as exciting. I mean, October is a beautiful month for sports, but another sport that has finally came back, the off season always seems like it's so long, but the NHL is back. It started last week. So far, I mean, it's still really early to look at things, but in the Eastern, top 4, we'll say the top 5 teams that you have right now: Montreal, New Jersey, my Pittsburgh Penguins, Columbus, and the New York Islanders. And then looking over at the Western, the top 5 that you have are Minnesota, San Jose, Nashville, Chicago, and Vancouver. I feel like right now, like I said, it's still early, but the top 5 teams that you have in the 2 leagues right now, those are the ones you're used to seeing.
Oh yeah, and Chicago has always been dominant. Pittsburgh has always been dominant.
Right.
Minnesota, I mean, they've always been kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they kind of have to catch up. They kind of die out in the middle of the season, but they come back.
Mm-hmm.
Nashville really opening their season out pretty strong, 2-0. I mean, I think that they are the sleeper in the West, to be honest, with all their additions that they've had in the offseason, the trade with James Neal, Patrick Matheson falling, getting James Neal from Pittsburgh, those 2 going to Pittsburgh. And, I mean, they're really good. I mean, they got Ollie Jokinen from Winnipeg.
Right.
And they've got 2 former captains from the Dallas Stars. I don't think anybody realizes that they've got Mike Ribeiro and Derek Boyd. They were both former captains of the Dallas Stars, and they can be point producers. I've seen in the past. And as long as Pecorine stays healthy, I mean, they do have a good backup. I think Hutton is his name, but Rene really needs to stay healthy. That's kind of what led to the fall last season. So as long as his hip is good to go, I think Nashville's good to go.
Looking at the standings right now, one thing that jumps out at me, maybe it's just because I'm not a huge fan of this team, but the Flyers are 0-2 to start the season. That's something I'm not used to seeing. Usually you look at the Flyers and you're thinking, okay, they're a pretty consistent team. They're fairly strong. But to start the season 0-2 already, it's a little hard to believe.
Yeah, they really have been going down a slippery slope. And they fired their coach after, I believe, 4 games last season. I mean, that's kind of quick to judge. And then Nashville picks them up, and they're starting 2-0, so that's kind of a smack in the face. But they're just they got rid of Scott Hartnell. I mean, that was really the face. I mean, obviously they have Claude Giroux, which was according to the best player in the world, but Scott Hartnell, I think, was more the face of the franchise. I mean, the fighter anyway. If anything, he was the grinder of the franchise, and they got rid of him. So that was really, that's kind of a morale boost in the locker room. That's not really good for him, but they've been really going down ever since the loss. The Stanley Cup to the Blackhawks, it's not really been the same over there in Philly. Right.
I think another interesting thing to look at is that the LA Kings are 1-1 right now. That's also surprising. I thought they'd come out and have a really solid start. Granted, like we've mentioned, it's already just the start. It's still really early. But I think overall, it could be a really exciting season for the NFL, or for the NHL, I should say. It's always exciting in the NHL.
Oh, yes.
Hockey is one of the most exciting sports. Nothing's ever the same. Everything changes. But that's it for this week. Next week we'll talk about the game against Ole Miss for the Vols and take a look to see what else happens crazy in the ever-changing world known as the Southeastern Conference and in college football in general. So that's it for this week. We will see you next week.